It's the audio equivalent of cramming a fancy sports car dashboard into, well, a go-kart. In the ever-expanding world of audio gear, especially budget gear, it's easy to get lost in the sea of options, from the eye-wateringly expensive, unjustified in many cases, to the downright sketchy. If I leave this plugged in tonight, will my smoke alarm go off? But every once in a while, a product or brand comes along and competes as well as excels at its price point. Enter the FX Audio DS07. A budget DAC that's here to shake things up a bit. FX Audio is a company that has been around for a while, but lately seems to be reinventing themselves with some new product lines. The quality from what I've seen so far has been good. The designs and innovation really seem to be pushing forward. The DS07 DAC I'm reviewing today is sort of the part 1 of 2 of this review. I'm going to be following it up with a pair of amps from FX Audio that sport the MA5332MS amp chip that is shared with some other notable designs from SMSL and Sabage. Using 2 here because these are capable of BTL, so you can utilize these as a pair of mini monoblocks if you're looking for a little more wattage. Anyway, that review will be coming soon as well. The packaging on this one feels a lot like others in this category. Simple but effective packaging, the DS07 itself, a power cord, USB cable, Bluetooth antenna, and a remote. Our significant others and family likely question how we can continue to be excited getting in these little black boxes. All seemingly similar looking amps and DACs out there, but audio enthusiasts like you and I, we tend to get it. Wives and family, maybe not so much. I can't even say that though, honestly. My wife supports me in all my crazy hobbies, so nothing really to complain about there. Sometimes she even plays along. Oh, is that another amp? In her head, she might be thinking something totally different, but that's here nor there. First off, the design on this new DAC. It's like FX Audio looked at the typical budget audio aesthetic and said, hold my beer. There's a new shape, the ribbed lines across the front. The 1.5-inch full color screen is a real eye catcher, honestly. You might be surprised at how much useful information they're getting on this screen. It's full color, shows the filter in use, outputs, sample rates, inputs, audio format, as well as the volume. It's the audio equivalent of cramming a fancy sports car dashboard into, well, a go-kart. And I don't mean that in a bad way either. It's a nice little screen. They just happen to attach it to a very affordable product. Topping should take some notes, or I guess they could continue to make displays that mimic a 90s alarm clock. Centered in the middle is a dual function volume wheel. Twist it to adjust the volume. You never would have guessed that one, right? A quick press, it'll mute, and a longer hold to navigate the menu. Select your inputs, Bluetooth pairings, select outputs, modify your filters, brightness, which I have at 100 here, or the dimmer if you want the screen to dim after a period of time. Simple but effective. Really a well laid out structure. My only point of contention here, and this isn't just for this DAC, it's basically all the DACs out there. These filters could use a short description behind them to give you a little bit of a better idea what they're trying to accomplish. You can cycle through these and see which one fits you the best. And just to give you a quick idea of what these filters are doing, think of filter 1 as the fast linear roll-off filter, 2 as a slow minimum, a earlier and more gentle roll-off, and 3, minimum phase, that has an earlier roll-off, but going back to more of a sharp drop. The filters do make a subtle but audible difference in rolling off the highs, so it might be useful if you have a particular speaker that sings a bit too brightly and needs a little bit of taming. Data security breaches are about as common as our favorite streaming services raising prices. So basically all the time. Scrolling the news, you're going to find endless examples of big and small corporations losing our personal info to the dark web. A few tips from someone working inside of IT for the last 15 years or so. Don't panic if someone attempts to scam you. Scammers thrive on that sort of thing. 2, simply don't open unknown attachments in your email. 3, don't click the links either. Trust me, you didn't win the prize that you didn't sign up for. And lastly, just use a password manager so you don't use the same passwords for your bank and for your Ice Cream of the Month subscription. With today's sponsor, Southern New Hampshire University, and their online cybersecurity program, you're going to have the opportunity to learn and defend against cyber attacks and protect an organization's data. A few notes about the program. During the program, you're going to learn about network, application, and incident security, as well as investigation protocols. You'll get hands-on experience in cyber labs and have the opportunity to participate in the National Cyber League competitions. SNHU's cybersecurity program has been designated as a National Center of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity by the NSA. And of course, you'll be taught by a faculty with real-world experience, one of the few opportunities to connect with people within the industry. Like I mentioned, I work in IT, and I personally believe there isn't a better time to start a career in cybersecurity. Right now, the expected growth rate is 32% by 2032, So even if you're not interested, possibly school years are behind you, pass the word to your kids or even grandkids on a field that looks very promising in the future. Go to https://snhu.edu/Matt Kuykendall. It's also linked below in the description to see if you qualify for the program today. You might be eligible for financial aid or even have previous credits that could fast track your degree. Click the link to get started. Now back to the video. Connectivity-wise, the DS07 has you covered for almost everything, at least everything you'd expect at this price point. USB, optical, coax, and even Bluetooth with LDAC support. It's like a Swiss Army knife for your audio needs, except instead of a corkscrew, it's got a slightly confusing remote control. It's honestly not that bad though. It's just the standard remote that comes with gear like this. Fits right in with some of my other SMSL remotes and many of the others that come with various desktop size amps and DACs. It's a shared remote across some of their other products, and it's really not as confusing as it looks. You get power, mute, volume, and track controls, as well as a center OK selection, input selection, and the ability to cycle through the filters. Really just ignore the amp and the player button if their DAC is the only one you have in this stack. Remotes are almost a must with me on these. I would venture to say a lot of people are going to use this as a DAC preamp combo. And the last thing I want to do if I'm sitting further than an arm's reach is to have to use that volume multifunction wheel to adjust the volume. Or, for example, cycle the inputs and filters. And even if it's being used at a desk like my general configuration, I would still rather use the remote. It's just faster, especially if you're going to be switching between inputs, something like between your PC and another device, like an external streamer. So, is it a simple budget remote? Yes, but it certainly works and it adds a good deal of usability here. Now let's talk about the audio performance. The ES9068AS DAC chip. It's shared across several brands like SMSL, Topping. I actually have another DAC from SMSL, the SU8S, that shares the same chip, so I was already familiar with the sound and filter options. A couple reviews out there have mentioned they felt this DAC was adding a warm coloration. I myself didn't come to that same conclusion. I would say it had a very transparent sound, as you would likely expect. It's possible you could get what you might consider being a slightly warmer sound with filter 3 rolling off the top end, but I would say, honestly, don't expect to get a warm sound here. You get out what you put in on a device like this, which is exactly what I prefer. If you want to tune the sound or add coloration, I would always suggest to do that at the speaker end. It's going to have the most notable differences. If you're chasing a warm coloration or really smooth sound coming from somewhere other than your speakers, or in some cases the amp selection, I would look elsewhere because this DAC is what I would consider highly resolving. Clean from top to bottom, really. To add a bit more, I didn't notice any glaring faults. The low end was fast and tight, and the general tonality while listening was linear and even across the spectrum. Basically, what I'm reiterating is it's going to give you a really nice clean sound. Whatever you put in is going to be passed along without coloration or fault. Usability on this one is high as well. A very usable screen, RCA and XLR outputs without the use of adapters like the E50 uses for balanced connections. It has plenty of inputs for various scenarios. I currently have it connected to my PC over USB, and then a separate coax connection coming in for my Weem streamer. Switching inputs for my use case is just a button push away on the remote. And speaking of the remote, it certainly adds more functionality when you're using this DAC as a preamp as well. Wrapping up the usability would just be the menu. It's one of the better laid out menu structures I've ran into on these budget DACs. It's really simple to navigate, and really the only area you might have some questions is the 3 filters that I went over earlier. Other than that, I really have no complaints for usability. Of course, no review would be complete without a couple of gripes. You have 2 options for power on this one. One from the remote power button. Great, that works just fine and I appreciate it. And the other, the actual power switch on the rear of the unit. I would have really liked a small power button on the front, or even something added to the volume multifunction wheel. Something like tap to pause, hold for menu, and long hold for power. It just makes things a little bit more simple than reaching behind the unit. In almost all cases, you can simply just use the remote or reach around if need be. But it just falls into one of those little gripes that I thought I'd mention. Beyond that, I think the only thing I would add here is a trigger. It's just a nice feature to have if you want to simplify powering on a downstream amplifier, assuming the amplifier has it as well. I could actually get around it in my setup since the Weem also includes a trigger out. So here's the thing, for the price, the FX Audio DS07 is the real deal, and I feel comfortable recommending it if you're shopping the 200 and below DAC category. The looks and build quality actually set it apart from some of the others, and it has enough features that I would say that it meets what I would call the category standards. It's really a good fit at this price point. complete with a nice display and feature set that should be able to satisfy most users' needs. So if you're in the market for a capable DAC that won't break the bank, the DS07 might just be the one for you. A lot of DACs at this price point will share a lot of the same internals. Like I mentioned, a number of them use this DAC chip and will basically be transparent. So in this case, you might gravitate to this one simply based off the design. It's at the very least a breakaway from the classic desktop DAC look with the case dimensions and the ribbing on the front. And it actually has a pretty nice little screen. Also, hang around for a later video on the matching amps. You can build a nice looking little stack with the same form factor, but more on that one later. Once again, I appreciate everyone who has subscribed to this point. You guys and gals keep this all going. And if you haven't already subscribed yet, please consider it. I have a lot of great content on the way, a CSS DIY speaker project, the newest mini monoblocks from Fozzy, headphones, tube amps, vintage gear, repairs, you get the idea. At this point, we're over 100 videos and 10,000 subscribers. So basically, onward from here to that 20K mark. Take care, and we'll talk soon. Later.